Tonight on Crime Stories.
Bundy was a master serial killer. It's not just a matter of a sexual drive. It's a matter of creating terror, fear in his victims.
I knew he was going to kill me. And I thought, no one's ever going to know what happened to me.
It was very interesting to everyone. You had a good-looking guy. You didn't have a creature out there.
He could not control the compulsion. If he could have, he'd still be free. I'll bet you.
On Saturday night, January 14th, 1978, while most students are either sleeping or just arriving home after a night out, a young man, calling himself Chris Hagen, walks through the entrance to Florida State University and makes his way across the quiet campus. With his keen ability to blend in, the outsider poses an ever-present danger to the pretty, dark-haired women he selects as his victims. Just after 2 a.m., the stranger slips into the Chi Omega sorority house, home to 36 young women. The predator moves swiftly and deliberately through the house, which is silent except for one young woman who brushes her teeth in the bathroom. He creeps by her and down the hall into another co-ed's room. His victims can't know who or what hit them. All are attacked while sleeping.
We got a call that came in that there had been a disturbance at the Chi Omega house, and we were just doing routine patrol around the campus. It was a quiet night. It was kind of cold.
1054, just a concerned citizen.
Something of that consistency knotted around her neck.
The scene is chaos. Terrified young women scurry in all directions as police and paramedics try to establish order.
And then I started going door to door. And this room was Lisa Levy's. And as soon as I entered, I went over and touched her. She was almost room temperature at that point, and I knew I had another victim.
When it is over, 1 month after the Chi Omega rampage, Florida police catch their killer. He tries to run from the officer who stopped his car.
Of course, after several minutes of fighting, I did manage to subdue him by striking him with my revolver.
A fake ID reads Kenneth Meisner, who is a swim coach at the university. But his real name is Theodore Robert Bundy, a vicious murderer and fugitive on the FBI's most wanted list. He is no ordinary killer. Smart, charming, with schoolboy good looks, Bundy fools his friends and mystifies police, all the while continuing to lure countless women to their gruesome deaths. On the outside, he appears confident and composed, yet just below the surface lurks a deeply troubled man.
Bundy basically was a sexual sadist who mastered appearing normal on the surface. I don't think Bundy himself understood the difference between Ted Bundy, the kind of charismatic Mr. Nice Guy, from the sexual killer that he actually was.
5 months after his arrest, the state of Florida formally charges Ted Bundy with the brutal murders at the Chi Omega sorority house.
What do we have here, Ken? Let's see. You always say an indictment, all right? Why don't you read it to me? You're up for election, aren't you?
Mr. Bundy
got it, didn't you?
Mr. Bundy?
You told him that you were going to get me. He said he was going to get me, okay? You've got the indictment. It's all you're going to get.
In all, he is suspected of murdering not just 1 or 2, but over 30 beautiful young women in 7 states. The name Ted Bundy becomes synonymous with serial killer.
My chance to talk to the press.
Contrary to Section 78204 Florida statute.
I'll plead not guilty right now.
And your grand jury is being...
On trial, Ted Bundy rivets the world's attention like no one since Jack the Ripper. He becomes the personification of evil in the public eye.
It was very interesting to everyone. You had a good-looking guy. You didn't have a creature out there, an ugly creature. You had somebody that everybody could reflect on. I mean, you had mothers saying, gee, if my daughter brought that guy home, I'd probably like it.
Over the course of 42 years, Ted Bundy would have many names and wear many masks. He crafted his image as the ordinary man to perfection, but the truth was something very different.
Bundy was a master serial killer. If there was anybody who was a pro, this was the guy. He knew how to get victims.
And he knew how to trick them. Bundy attracted women using a number of ploys to entice his victims.
Here's a guy that stalked everybody. He never attacked a woman that he talked to for longer than 20 minutes because he didn't want to, he's afraid of that relationship beginning.
In one instance, he used crutches to give the appearance of being a harmless, injured man in need of assistance.
A serial killer, an organized serial killer for the most part, does not need a gun to control his victim or a knife or a weapon, because usually they're manipulating and conning their victim to the point where they can get them into a vulnerable situation where in fact the victim then is in trouble.
What he did was he would hit him quick. And he would blitz them with this tire iron or whatever instrument he used to render them helpless.
One of the hallmarks of the serial killer is premeditation. They plan and they premeditate. It's based on fantasies that started very young in their lifetime and have grown with them throughout their lives.
Ted Bundy was born in 1946, out of wedlock, to Eleanor Louise Cowell. When Ted was 5, Louise met and married an Army cook by the name of Johnny Culpepper Bundy. Ted was adopted by his new father, and shortly thereafter,
Almost to the beginning of his life.
as a youth, Ted Bundy was terribly shy. Often he was teased and made the butt of pranks by bullies in his junior high school.
People did not find me attractive or likable. I compensated for it by being seemingly aloof and arrogant and intellectual.
In high school, Bundy withdrew, covering up his emotional insecurity by becoming a promising student. His good grades got him into the University of Washington, where he began a program of intensive Chinese and, eventually, abnormal psychology. Here, Bundy continued to mold his public persona, feigning an air of self-assurance. In the spring of 1966, Bundy began a relationship that would change his life forever. He met a young woman who was everything he had dreamed of. Beautiful, highly sophisticated, and from a wealthy California family. But after graduation, she dropped Bundy. He was devastated. Bundy became possessed with an icy resolve. He lived in this Seattle rooming house and bounced from job to job. In 1971, he was earning money manning the phones at the Crisis Clinic, a suicide prevention and crisis hotline. Anne Rule, who was a co-worker for the hotline, remembers her young colleague as patient and helpful. She would later author a best-selling book about Bundy.
He was empathetic. He was sympathetic. He had a gentle voice. He was so understanding, and he was good at keeping people alive. He was getting a master's degree in sexual murders.
By then, Bundy was a convincing actor. He was deeply involved with a new woman who was devoted to him. And he was working for the committee to re-elect Republican Governor Dan Evans.
My part in the campaign was so insignificant, I'm embarrassed that I should be getting this.
Everyone who met Bundy seemed to think this smart, handsome man had a bright future ahead of him. Beginning in January 1974, a string of young women
where he abducted her. She had to walk through this to get to her dorm.
I would be obsessed with searching for her. She had a bright yellow ski coat. I would just look for that everywhere we went. I found myself looking in fields and ditches for this yellow ski jacket to stick out like a sore thumb. And I would be able to say, I found her. And we looked for a long time.
That spring, women continue to vanish, all strikingly similar in appearance, but from different Northwest cities. Most from public places, a college campus, a tavern. In-county police detectives, including a young Robert Keppel, joined forces with search and rescue volunteers to comb the 400-acre park.
Well, the first break was on September 7th, 74, when we found the remains of Janice Ott, Denise Naslund, and one more person, or at least one more person. Then, March 5th, 1975 was when the first skull was found on Taylor Mountain. And then subsequent to that, we found the remains of 3 more people.
Ted Bundy didn't leave a lot of evidence for the police. He would put bodies into locations where nature, the weather, animal life would destroy the bodies, leaving very little for the police, dragging the bones around.
King County police are flooded with calls. Friends, strangers, boyfriends, even husbands are being turned into the police at the rate of hundreds a day. In October 1974, Ted Bundy's girlfriend calls. Panicked, she begins to piece important dates and events together and suspects her boyfriend may be the Ted police are looking for. She recalls that on the evening of July 14th, the same day the 2 women disappeared from the park, Bundy came home filthy, exhausted, and starving. He then took her out for burgers and ice cream.
It is not beyond the capacity of an individual like this to go out to commit a murder, to go back to the girlfriend, to take her out to dinner, and maybe present her with a little gift, a little necklace or a ring that he just took off his victim.
The name Theodore Robert Bundy is added to a list of more than 2,000 possible suspects. But just as mysteriously as the murders start, by the fall of 1974, they stop. Ted Bundy has moved to Utah, leaving the Northwest in terror and the police as baffled as ever.
King's Cross ER, St. Vincent's Hospital.
Have we got a surgeon on deck?
A window into a world of medicine where everything can change in a heartbeat. King's Cross ER, St. Vincent's Hospital. Tonight, 7:30, exclusive to CI.
Inside that camera, just between the capacitor and the infrared sensor, there's something familiar. A battery. And while it may not be the biggest decision of your day, consider this. When IMAX needed batteries for their 3D camera, they trusted Duracell. So whether it's photographing the heavens or getting a few snapshots of life on Earth, it just has to work. Duracell, trusted everywhere.
Foxtel's coverage of the London 2012 Olympic Games is brought to you by Duracell, trusted everywhere.
I'm here in Weymouth on England's southern coast, invited by Malcolm Page and Matt Belcher to take part in their training to find out exactly what it is they do so well.
Do I need to be doing anything? It's those minor adjustments that are the difficult thing, isn't it? Your hands just burn.
Well, I definitely have a newfound respect for this sport, and they're definitely going to be a force to be reckoned with here in London 2012. What do you think of the venue?
The winds seem to be like they're going to be pretty good. Going to get a nice variety, a bit of current and plenty of waves to play with, and you know, what else can a sailor want?
How are you feeling in sense of defending that Olympic title?
We are favourites, and I have no problems carrying that tag into the game.
The only place to see the games live, in full and in stunning HD is on Foxtel.
Finding the right life insurance for your family used to be a big hassle.
With a young family, we knew we needed life insurance, but we kept putting it off. We just thought it would be too complicated. Then a friend recommended Choosy.
Choosy is a free service. On our website, you can research and compare a wide range of policies from over 15 of Australia's leading insurance brands.
I just answered a few simple questions and Choosy gave me multiple quotes, along with lots of other useful information which helped me choose the right policy for my family and budget. Choosy's friendly team is based in Australia, and they helped me through every step of the application process. By the end of the call, we were already covered.
Choosy made it quick and easy to get our life insurance sorted in a single phone call. And better still, at the right price for our family.
Whether it's your first insurance policy or you need to top up your existing cover, call Choosy now on 1300 36 3234 or visit choosy.com.au.
Choosy, the better way to choose life insurance.
How do I stay young? Diet? Knife?
Someone had been caught trying to break into my car.
Posing as a police officer, Bundy asks Durange to follow him to her car, where she finds it locked and untouched by any burglar.
And then this is where we came out right here and walked through this parking lot. I told him there was nothing missing, and he asked me if I would come with him over to the substation because they were holding the man that had tried to break into my car.
Bundy then leads her to what he says is a police substation. It is actually the back door of a launch. She gets in anyway.
I thought it was a little strange, but I just thought, you know, maybe he's off duty, undercover.
Once inside the car, the handsome officer Roseland suddenly vanishes. In his place appears a deranged murderer, Duranch and the world would soon know as Ted Bundy.
And he pulled over and stopped the car, and it's then that I said, you know, what are you doing? Why are you stopping? It occurred to me, you know, that he wasn't who he said he was, and that something really bad was going to happen, and towards us. So I broke away and ran towards the car.
By a stroke of luck, the victim manages to avoid his deadly grasp. But Bundy, enraged, won't go home empty-handed. Later that evening, he kidnaps a young woman as she leaves her high school play.
I just knew it was the same person. This person immediately drove away from me and had to find another victim. I think that was probably my first reaction. Just, I was very lucky.
"9 months after Duranch's lucky escape, Ted Bundy is pulled over while suspiciously cruising a quiet residential neighborhood. It would have been a routine stop had Bundy not provoked suspicion with a phony alibi. When authorities find an odd collection of tools in his trunk, they suspect he is a burglar and arrest him.
Rope, ice pick, tire iron, handcuffs, pantyhose ski.
Surprised? I don't know. I didn't know what to expect. I've never been in a jail before, never been arrested before.
In the fall of 1975, investigators from Washington, Utah, and Colorado meet to compare notes about Ted Bundy. They suspect he is a mass killer, but determine they know everything and yet nothing about him. On February 23, 1976, Ted Bundy goes on trial for the abduction and attempted murder of Carol Duranch.
I think the evidence spoke for itself. We had the crowbar or pry bar that he tried to use on Carol Duranch was found in his automobile. We had the handcuffs, which were taken off of Carol Duranch's arm at the time that she broke away from Ted.
Her identification of Mr. Bundy, and then there were some strange things going on in the courtroom. Mr. Bundy would appear in the morning in one suit and in the afternoon in a different suit, comb his hair in a different way. He was described in the media as a changeling, and it was very true.
By changing his appearance, Bundy may think he can throw off the judge, but his eyes give him away.
He looked different in all the pictures. His hair had gained weight, lost weight, but his eyes were just the same. They were just so cold and just no expression in them, just no feeling to them.
On February 27, 1976, Bundy is found guilty and sentenced to a term of 1 to 15 years in the Utah State Prison. The judge requests a psychological evaluation, which remarkably finds Bundy to be neither psychotic nor a sexual deviant, nor suffering any kind of character disorder. The report determines, however, that he seems to have a fear of being humiliated in his relationships with women. While serving his term in Utah, Ted Bundy's troubles continue to mount. Investigators in Colorado are increasingly confident they can link Bundy with the gruesome murder of one young woman in their state. Trial for the murder of 23-year-old Karen Campbell. But Bundy does not arrive in Aspen like a man who fears facing a murder trial.
He was charming, he was inquisitive, curious, shifty eyes, always observing things. Whenever I was relating with him, I knew he had an angle. He'd ask me a question, "Where's that road go?" I'd laugh. I said, "Goes to hell, Ted. Where's that road go?" Same place. Don't work me.
Bundy informs the Colorado court that he intends to represent himself at his murder trial. Although he is inexperienced, he does have some legal training, enough that authorities allow him to do his own research in the law library in Aspen's courthouse. Bundy notices that on hot days, the second-story window of the courthouse library is left open. On June 7, 1977, Bundy waits until he is left alone for less than a minute, then jumps out the open window.
At 10:30 or 11 in the morning, I was phoned by the office saying, "Get your gun, Bundy's escaped."
Bundy eludes police for days. He hikes miles into the remote mountains and hides out in an unoccupied cabin. 6 days later, a delirious Bundy is recaptured as he tries to drive out of Aspen in a stolen car. Police think they have a drunk driver, then realize he is their fugitive. This time, Bundy is housed at the more secure Garfield County Jail in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. But Ted Bundy will not stay put for long. On December 30th, just weeks before his murder trial is set to begin, he outsmarts the police yet again. Shortly after the evening meal is served, Bundy stuffs his law books under the blanket on his cot and pulls himself up through a small hole he cut in the jailhouse ceiling. He wriggles into a crawl space and makes his way to another part of the building. A small opening leads into the closet of a jailer's apartment. When the coast is clear, Bundy lowers himself down and casually walks out a side door to freedom, the Florida sun, and the stimulating atmosphere of a college town. It is here that Ted Bundy goes on a grisly rampage that shocks the nation.
The killer struck first at the Chi Omega sorority house. He clubbed and then strangled to death 20-year-old Lisa Levy and 21-year-old Margaret Bowman. At least one of them was raped. The killer came in from the night and then returned to it with an ease that has so far baffled police and left most co-eds here terrified.
He was off on a killing spree with nowhere to go. He wasn't planning.
3 weeks later, Bundy abducts and kills his youngest victim, 12-year-old Kimberly Leach. She disappears right in front of her school. Florida residents can't comprehend what kind of monster is lurking in their midst. On February 15, 1978, Ted Bundy is pulled over while creeping along a deserted street in Pensacola, Florida. He attempts to run. When he is finally apprehended, it takes days before Florida authorities realize who they have caught. During his first few days of captivity, Bundy taunts Florida authorities with a near confession. Recognizing that he commands attention, Bundy suddenly reverts to his usual role of denial and belligerence.
Sure there won't be any press interviews. You've given them out. I'm gagged, you're not. Okay.
All right, will read you.
I'll be heard.
Even he is competent and allows him to represent himself. In a macabre twist of fate, authorities are forced to allow Bundy to depose or question all the witnesses at the Chi Omega sorority.
He called in most of the sorority sisters, a lot of the police officers he deposed, some of our experts. Obviously, the witnesses themselves, especially the girls from the sorority house, were scared to death.
It became his show. And like they say, the old maxim in the law is that a person who represents himself has a fool for a client. And it's true.
Even from behind prison bars, Bundy manages to keep the world enraptured. But it is this desperate need to be center stage that ultimately leads to his undoing. Now back to Ted Bundy, Beneath the Mask on Crime Stories. On June 25, 1979, Theodore Robert Bundy goes on trial for the Florida Chi Omega murders. The entire top floor of the courthouse grew.
Good morning, officer. Good morning.
He bantered with the officer a little bit, straightened his coat up, and then asked a question which I think sealed his fate.
Describe the condition of room number 4, of Lisa Levy's room when you entered it.
There was a large amount of blood around the top of the head and splattered on the walls. Her body temperature was way down. She was almost cool to the touch.
And you cannot recall any debris other than blood? Is that your testimony? Is that your recollection?
That's the best of my recollection, yes, sir.
Left the house. Her testimony falls on an audience primed to believe the worst.
Is that man in the courtroom today?
Yes, he is.
Would you point him out for us, please?
And seeing her, I can see her, that man, pointing to Ted. And Ted's sitting there like, well, what's she talking about?
We, as a defense, needed to limit her testimony because she had been subjected to hypnosis, and her memory got better after the hypnosis.
The first time that you see this individual, tell me, where are you, and what time is it, and what day is it?
The inclusion of Neary's testimony is later challenged in Florida's Supreme Court. And while the court rules that hypnotically enhanced testimony cannot be used again, they uphold its use in Bundy's case. This exception has become known as the Bundy rule. Neary's testimony is damaging to Bundy. The state moves on to the presentation of the physical evidence.
It came into the courtroom on a floor dolly. There were all these boxes of stuff, and people waited.
Chance to avoid the electric chair is to plead insanity. In numerous appeals, his attorneys try to prove that he was insane, both at the time he committed the murders and during the trial. But Bundy's monstrous ego counters their efforts.
Ted Bundy was considered sane under law in his trials, and eventually, of course, was executed for his crimes because he planned, he premeditated.
From death row, Bundy slowly reveals the details of his horrendous crimes to authorities.
He mentioned words like necrophilia. He talks about having severed heads at home with him at one time, 4 or 5 heads at home here in Seattle. He mentioned possession, control.
After the first sexual encounter, gradually his sexual desire builds back up, wanting to fulfill this other need to totally possess her, as it were, as she lay there because, he strangled her to death.
He enjoyed talking about himself and his crimes only in the third person because he was too smart to pin himself into a confession. Now, a psychiatrist would look at this and they'd say, well, this is multiple personality disorder. I think not. I think Bundy basically was a sexual sadist.
And the state of Florida would just kind of forget about executing him. What another mistake that he made was misunderstanding the will of the state of Florida to end his life. He never did understand that.
Almost 9 years after his conviction, the state of Florida denies Bundy's final appeals and sets a date of execution. In a morbid death vigil, the nation holds a party.
It's time for him to go. And now I have a daughter that lives in Lake City, and I want him gone.
If he did to your daughter what he did to that little girl, where would you want him to go?
I'm saying that he ought to die. And all the ones that's over the honor protesting, even the judges and the jury, the ones that's all been against him and kept him alive this long, they should be done the same way as he's going to get it.
On January 24th, 1989, at the age of 42, Ted Bundy is executed at Florida State Prison.
Someone like that shouldn't have the right to live. After taking so many lives in such a horrible way, I think he got what he deserved, and not soon enough.
Ted Bundy was everything a cold-blooded killer is not thought to be. In the end, he became a celebrity, the most hated in America. His handsome, smiling face a chilling reminder that things are often not what they seem.
Why didn't you see? Everybody who knew him, I'm sure, went through that. Why didn't you see?
Over the years, Ann Rule has received hundreds of letters from women, young and old, who were seduced by Ted Bundy's enigmatic disguise.
Through knowing Ted Bundy, I realized none of us can really tell until that terrible moment of truth when he peels off the mask and you see the monster underneath. With Ted, only the victims saw that, and when they saw that, it was much too late for them.
I just think it was horrifying, years later to find out that he is the most notorious serial killer of the century. That I got away, I think I was extremely lucky.